January 12, 9:47 a.m. St. Clair, Michigan. My handbag slipped from my hands when Becky Reynolds snatched it and pulled out a folded document. She read it aloud, calmly, almost casually, yet loud enough for everyone near the courthouse metal detector to hear. Petition for declaration of incapacity. Signature Trevor Reynolds. Estimated property value, $250,000. Then she looked straight at me and said, as if stating a simple fact, "You're being moved into a care home, Lillian." Trevor agreed. The clerk stopped typing. Security paused at the door. Even strangers fell silent. And my son, my only son, stood beside her, eyes lowered, pretending none of this had anything to do with him. I felt the cold of the floor rise up through my shoes. That was the moment I understood. Something in my family had already shifted long before today. How could they do this to me? If you want to know what happened next, subscribe to the channel, and I'll tell you my story from the beginning. My name is Lillian Moore, and for 32 years I sat on a raised bench that looked down over other people's worst days. I was a family court judge, the one they called when tempers were high and futures were small and fragile. I listened to mothers who had nowhere else to go, fathers who were trying to begin again, grandparents standing there with trembling hands asking to see the children they loved. I carried all of that home on my shoulders and told myself it was a privilege. In that courtroom my voice could stop shouting. One tap of the gavel, and the room had to listen. I read every page, every line, every small clause that other people skimmed. I knew how quickly a single sentence on a form could change a life. I knew how power moved on paper long before I ever watched it move against me. Out of all the cases I handled, the stories that cut the deepest were the quiet ones. The woman who slipped me photographs of bruises she pretended were accidents. The boy who stood straight as a soldier while his parents argued about who had wasted more money. The gray-haired man whose children rolled their eyes when he repeated himself, right there in front of me, as if his age made him soft clay to be shaped. I wrote orders to protect people like them. I believed I understood what it meant to be used. At home, though, my strength seemed to dissolve the moment I turned the key in my own front door. The house on Maple Street was modest but tidy, full of steady things. The ticking wall clock in the kitchen, the lavender sachets in my dresser drawers, the framed photo of Trevor at age 8, missing his front teeth, holding up a crooked clay mug he had made for me. I still drink tea from that mug. The glaze is cracked now like an old roadmap of heat and time. Trevor was the child I organized my entire life around. I worked late and skipped vacations so he would not have to take out loans for school. When he crashed his first car in college, I paid the repair bill before he could feel the true size of the mistake. When he struggled with anxiety in his 20s, I found him a therapist, drove him to appointments, and sat outside in the waiting room with a magazine I never really read. He used to call me every Sunday. We would talk about small things. His job, the weather, the new restaurant he and Becky had tried. I learned to listen more than speak, careful not to sound like I was giving advice. "You're the judge, Mom," he would joke, "not my life coach." I would laugh, but somewhere inside me, a little door began to close. Becky entered our lives like a gust of perfume from a department store. She was quick, sharp, and always put together. Her nails were never chipped. Her lipstick was always the exact same shade. A clever pink that looked expensive without trying. She worked at a large law firm downtown, and on paper she was generous. She brought wine to dinner, bought Trevor polished shoes, posted photographs of the three of us together with cheerful captions about family time. But Becky watched me the way a person watches a piece of furniture they might someday want to replace. She noticed my flats instead of heels, the way I folded receipts and tucked them into a small envelope in my purse. "You should let yourself be taken care of now," she would tell me, smiling. "You've done enough." She loved status more than people, though I did not let myself say that aloud at first. You could see it in the way her eyes lit upon labels, cars, titles. She admired the letters after my name on the plaque in my hallway, but she admired even more the estimate the realtor once gave for my house, the whisper of good neighborhood and steady appreciation that came with it. If I am honest, I have to admit that I made it easy for them. I was proud of what I had built, but I was tired. I told Trevor where the spare keys were. I added him to my bank account for emergencies. I handed him copies of insurance policies and the deed to the house, all in a neat folder. I believed I was being responsible, doing what any sensible widow would do. When my husband died, I handled everything alone, and I did not want that for my son. In court, I would have called it what it was. A transfer of trust without safeguards. At home, I called it love. I told myself that giving Trevor and Becky access was proof that I believed in them. I told myself that loosening my grip would make their lives easier and our relationship stronger. I did not ask what they might do with that access if their priorities ever changed. Back then, if someone had warned me, I would have smiled and said, "My son is not like that. He knows how hard I worked. He would never treat me as a burden." I believed that history and sacrifice formed a bond nothing could tear. I trusted that the love I had poured into him would always return to me. Soon. The first real crack showed up in something as simple as a birthday card. 2 years ago, on my 70th, the house on Maple Street smelled of roasted chicken and lemon cake. I had set the table with my good china, the set with the faint blue rim that my mother gave me when I married. A single candle flickered on the kitchen counter, one of those lavender ones I buy in bulk, because I like the way the scent softens the air. Trevor and Becky arrived 20 minutes late. I watched their car pull up from the front window, Trevor's familiar old sedan now upgraded to something sleeker, with a dashboard that glowed like a small spaceship. Becky stepped out first, heels clicking on the walkway, coat belted tight, gift bag looped neatly over her wrist. "Happy birthday, Mom," Trevor said, hugging me quickly, already half turned toward his phone buzzing in his pocket. Becky kissed the air beside my cheek. 70, she said. "You wear it well." We ate the meal I had prepared. Trevor checked his messages between bites. Becky scrolled through photos, occasionally holding the screen up to show me their vacation in Florida, or the new restaurant downtown. I nodded, smiled, asked questions. It felt like watching a show where I was allowed to sit in the audience but not step onto the stage. After dinner, I brought the cake to the table, its frosting imperfect but earnest. 7 thin candles, one for each decade, burned in a crooked line. Trevor sang softly. Becky hummed the last few notes, already reaching for her bag. "I got you something practical," she said. "You'll thank me later." She handed me a long flat envelope. The paper was heavy, the kind used for official documents. I remember feeling an odd chill at the weight of it before I had even opened it. Inside was a typed list, names, addresses, phone numbers. A header at the top in bold letters. Assisted living and retirement communities, recommended. I stared at it for a moment, thinking I had misread. Becky smiled, as if she had given me a gift certificate to a spa. "These are nice places," she said. "I did my research. Some of them have on-site medical staff, activities, transportation, everything you'll need when the house becomes too much." Trevor shifted in his chair. "Becky," he murmured, but there was no real protest in his voice. "You know," she continued, tapping the paper with a manicured finger, "just in case. You're already struggling to lift a cup sometimes." She laughed lightly, as if it were a harmless joke. I did not laugh. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller, the walls closer. The hum of the refrigerator seemed louder than their voices. I looked down at my hands, at the veins like pale rivers under thin skin. I thought of the morning's groceries, the bags I had carried in, the stairs I still climbed every night. I thought of the rulings I had issued just that week, the statutes I could still cite from memory. "I manage," I said quietly. "I'm not helpless." "Of course not," Becky replied too quickly. "We just want to be prepared. You know how these things go. False memory decline. Better to plan ahead, right?" Trevor finally met my eyes. There was something there I had not seen before. Not cruelty, not exactly. Calculation, maybe. Or fear. The awareness that time moves only one way and that someday a parent becomes a responsibility to be scheduled, budgeted, contained. "I just worry about you being alone in this big house," he said. "It's a lot." I folded the list in half, then in half again, feeling the edges press into my fingertips. "I appreciate the thought," I said, "because that is what courteous people say. But I am fine where I am." The moment passed. Becky leaned back in her chair, shrugging. "Well, keep it," she said. "You never know." We moved on. We cut the cake. We took a few photos, Becky insisted, arranging us at the table, making me hold the card she had brought, not the list. The pictures are still on my phone. Trevor's arm around my shoulder, Becky's smile perfectly angled, My own expression composed, polite. Later that night, when the house was quiet and the dishes were drying in the rack, I sat at the kitchen table with that folded list in front of me. The lavender candle had burned down to a small pool of wax. I listened to the clock tick toward midnight. I smoothed the paper out and read each line carefully. Some of the facilities were across town. One was nearly an hour away. I recognized a few names from cases I'd had, children petitioning to move an aging parent closer for their own good. Or more bluntly, so they could sell the house faster. My name was not written anywhere on the page, but I could see it there, invisible ink waiting to be filled in. Back then, I told myself it was just Becky's morbid practicality, her way of trying to control every possible future. I told myself Trevor had simply gone along with it to keep the peace. I slipped the list into a drawer with warranties and old manuals, a place where things went when I did not want to think about them. If that document had crossed my bench under different circumstances, I would have asked questions. Who benefits financially? Who gains convenience? Has anyone asked the person at the center what they truly want? But I was not judged more that night. I was just Lillian, a 70-year-old woman sitting at her own kitchen table, trying not to read too much into a practical gift. I blew out the candle, turned off the light, and walked upstairs, telling myself that families joke about these things all the time. Now looking back, I know better. That list was not a joke. It was the first knife laid carefully on the table. After my 70th birthday, nothing exploded. My life simply began to thin like fabric rubbed too many times at the same spot. Little threads came loose in places I had always trusted to hold. The first thing to fray was our routine. Trevor's Sunday calls grew shorter. At first there were reasons. A deadline at work, a migraine, a client dinner. I told myself it was normal. Adult children build their own lives. When he did call, he spoke quickly, as if a meter were running somewhere, and I answered carefully, avoiding anything that might sound like judgment. Then entire Sundays passed without the phone ringing. I would sit in my armchair by the front window with a book resting open on my lap, the words swimming a little out of focus as my attention drifted toward the silent phone on the end table. When I called him, sometimes he picked up. Sometimes he didn't. "Sorry, Mom," he would say 2 or 3 days later. "It's been crazy. You know how it is." I did know how it was. I had lived through trial seasons where I ate dinner at my desk and took files home on weekends. But even then, I found 10 minutes to call my own mother. You always manage to call the people you are afraid of losing. Next, the invitations thinned out. I heard about barbecues and birthday parties secondhand, from things Becky posted online or from brief mentions Trevor dropped at the end of conversations. "We're going to a thing on Saturday," he would say. "It's probably going to run late." There was no explicit exclusion, just an absence of details that made it clear I was not expected. "We're trying to keep our weekends for us," Becky told me one afternoon when I pressed gently. "Couples time. It's healthy, you know?" "Of course," I said. "I understand." It was not the answer I wanted to give, but I had seen what happened when parents insisted on inclusion. I would not drag my own son into that terrain. The unannounced visits went worse. One Wednesday I baked a batch of oatmeal cookies, Trevor's favorite, and decided to drop them off. Their driveway was empty, but light spilled from the living room window. I rang the bell, the warm container balanced in my hands. No answer. I knocked gently, then harder. The television murmured inside, the faint rise and fall of dialogue. A shape moved behind the curtain and stilled. A minute later my phone buzzed in my pocket. "Hey Mom," Trevor had texted. "Next time can you call first? Becky's got meetings at home. We're trying to keep things controlled. Love you." Controlled. Later at a restaurant, Becky explained it more directly. "We like to keep our space organized," she said, cutting her food into precise pieces. "Drop-ins make everything chaotic. Don't take it personally." I smiled and said I didn't. Little comments about me began to surface, wrapped in silk. "You're representing us when we go out," Becky said one evening, tugging lightly at my cardigan. "We should get you into something more modern. People notice these things." Another time, as I reached to lift my granddaughter from her stroller, Becky stepped between us with a bright laugh. "Careful," she said. "Your hands shake sometimes." I looked down at my fingers. They were steady. "I'm fine," I answered. I know," she replied. "I just worry. You're not 25 anymore. Access to my granddaughter became a schedule to request instead of a joy freely given. I could see her if I asked far enough in advance, if it fit around naps and activities in Becky's calendar. She needs consistency, Becky would say. Different routines throw her off. I knew children could handle more than adults like to admit. I had watched them adapt to 2 households, 3, even 4, and still find ways to laugh. But I also knew when an argument was unwinnable. So I swallowed my protests and accepted the hours I was granted. Through all of this, I remained quiet. I told myself that peace in the family depended on my ability to absorb small wounds without reacting. I had witnessed so many tiny conflicts grow teeth. I believed that if someone had to carry the discomfort, it might as well be me. I was the one who lived alone. I was the one who had practiced patience in courtrooms where people screamed. So I made coffee each morning in Trevor's chipped clay mug. I walked through my house at night, checking locks and switches, straightening the stack of important documents in my desk drawer. The deed, the insurance, the bank information. The folder with his name on it. I thought those gestures meant I was being diligent and loving. I did not yet understand that, to someone else, they looked like a map. A map of what could be taken if the right papers were filed and the right signatures obtained. And little by little, I was being shifted from the center of my own life to the margins of theirs. I noticed the change, but instead of drawing a line, I stepped back and called it love yet. The morning of the betrayal began like any other, quiet, ordinary, forgettable. I brewed my tea in Trevor's old clay mug, the one with the uneven rim, and listened to the slow hum of the refrigerator. Outside, snow collected along the porch railing in a thin, clean line. Nothing suggested that by afternoon, the life I had protected for decades would be treated like something others felt entitled to divide. I went to the courthouse because Harry Cole, then an old colleague, had asked me to look over a brief for him. "Just your eyes," he'd said on the phone. "You always catch the clauses the rest of us miss." It felt good to be needed professionally, even in retirement. I wore my dark wool coat, the one with deep pockets, and packed the folder he'd sent me. The lobby was warm after the cold outside. A few attorneys chatted near the security line. A clerk hurried past with a stack of files pressed to her chest. I placed my handbag on the inspection tray, watching it disappear through the scanner. I stood there, hands free, breathing in the familiar scent of floor polish and old paper. Then I heard heels behind me, quick, decisive, too loud for the space. Before I could turn, my handbag was snatched, the force of it pulling my shoulder slightly forward. I gasped, instinctively reaching out, thinking a thief had grabbed it. When I faced the person holding it, the shock was sharper than any physical jolt. Becky. Her eyes were bright, almost feverish. "Well," she said, "look who's been avoiding us." I hadn't been avoiding anyone. They were the ones who had closed doors, postponed visits, ignored calls. But the truth didn't matter to her, and I understood that in an instant. She reached into my bag and pulled out a thick envelope. Too thick, I realized, to be anything of mine. She had placed something inside my handbag before I even arrived. My heart gave a muffled, frightened thump. "What is that?" I asked. She opened the envelope without answering. A stack of legal papers slid out, crisp and white. She held them like a prize. "Let's clear this up in public," she said. And then she began to read. Her voice was steady, loud enough to carry across the entire lobby. A few heads turned at the first line. More turned at the second. By the third, the room had gone utterly still. Petition for declaration of incapacity. Filed January 10th. Signature, Trevor Reynolds. My son's name on a document that questioned my competence. My mind, my memory, my ability to manage my own home. I felt something inside me drop, as if a floorboard had broken beneath my feet. Becky flipped to the next page. Estimated property value, $250,000. Transfer date, January 14th. She looked directly into my eyes when she said transfer, as though savoring the word. I could hear the soft rustle of coats behind me as more people turned to watch. A clerk, halfway to the elevator, stopped in place. Even the security guard stepped closer, unsure whether to intervene. My son stood 6 feet away, hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly hunched. When my eyes met his, he looked down at the floor. Not at me, at the floor. As if the tiles were suddenly more deserving of his attention than his own mother being publicly declared incompetent. Trevor, I whispered, but no sound seemed to reach him. Becky pressed the final page flat against her palm. You're going into assisted care, Lillian. No arguments. The house is being transferred. We're doing what's best for you. And frankly, she paused, letting the silence gather, it's long overdue. Someone behind me inhaled sharply. My chest tightened until it hurt to breathe. For a moment I wondered if I might faint. The edges of the room blurred. I thought of the birthday list Becky had given me. I thought of the unreturned calls, the closed doors, the odd, clipped statements about control, image, consistency. All of it rushed back like pieces of a puzzle snapping into place. I bent down and lifted the paper she'd let fall to the floor, my hand steady, my movements slow. The pages were smooth, cool, impersonal. Nothing on them hinted at the years I had worked, the sacrifices I had made, the nights I had sat awake worrying about Trevor, or the afternoons I had spent rocking my granddaughter to sleep. They were taking more than a house. More than money. They were taking my autonomy. My voice. My place in my own life. And my son, the boy I once carried on my hip, had signed his name to make it possible. I folded the papers carefully and placed them back in my handbag. Becky smirked, as if she assumed my silence meant acceptance. But what I felt was not defeat. It was something cold, precise, and clarifying. A stillness I recognized from the bench years ago, when a verdict formed in my mind long before I spoke it. I straightened, met Becky's stare, and understood one thing with absolute certainty. This would not end the way they expected. I walked away from the metal detector as if I were leaving a fire, the heat still on my skin but the flames behind me. The pages Becky had dropped were in my handbag now, their sharp corners pressing against the lining with each step I took across the polished floor. No one stopped me. No one asked if I was all right. People returned to their conversations as though they had watched a short, uncomfortable scene and were relieved it was over. To them it was gossip. To me it was the moment the ground under my life shifted. I did not go home. My feet carried me down the corridor to a bench outside an unused courtroom, one I had presided in years before. The door was closed. The plaque beside it still bore my name in worn brass, the Honorable Lillian Moore. Seeing it steadied my breathing. I sat down, placed my handbag on my lap and opened it. My fingers did not shake. I took out the packet of papers Becky had brandished like a weapon and laid them across my knees. This time I read them not as a victim but as a judge. The petition stated in plain language that I was no longer able to manage my own affairs. It cited forgetfulness, mood instability, and declining physical capacity. There were vague references to missed appointments that had never happened, unpaid bills that did not exist, episodes of confusion no one had ever witnessed. Trevor's signature sat at the bottom of the page, smooth and practiced. I traced the line of his name with my eyes, remembering the first time I showed him how to write it, guiding his small hand across a sheet of paper at the kitchen table. He had grinned at his crooked letters. "It's me," he had said, proud. Now his name was being used to erase me. Behind the petition was a proposed transfer of property. My house, listed neatly with its address on Maple Street, was to be placed under his control for the protection of assets and efficient management of care. One column listed value, $250,000. Another listed anticipated costs of long-term residential placement. Not in my handwriting. Not in my words. A cool, deliberate calm settled over me. In court, when lawyers grew loud and emotional, I often went quiet inside. It was in that quiet that I could see the shape of the truth. I felt that same quiet now, like a room I stepped into and closed the door behind me. I looked at the date. Transfer set for January 14th. 2 days. They had given themselves 2 days to move my life out from under me before I could react. They must have thought I would fold, cry, sign whatever they put in front of me. Instead, I folded the papers along their creases, smooth and exact, as if I were handling evidence. Because that was what they had become. Evidence of intent. Evidence of planning. Evidence that the distance I had felt for months was not just stress but a strategy. I slid the documents back into my handbag and closed it, the clasp clicking with a small final sound. I sat there for another minute, listening to the echo of that click in my mind. For years, I had told myself that staying small would keep the family together. That if there were a price to pay for peace, it should be mine. that love meant understanding, and understanding meant excusing. Sitting outside that empty courtroom, I understood something else. Silence had not protected me. It had simply cleared a path for others to walk over me without resistance. I smoothed my skirt, stood up and adjusted my coat. My knees ached, but they held. My mind was clear. I knew who I was. A woman who had spent decades reading the fine print of people's worst intentions and calling them by their true names. Never again, I said aloud, my voice low but steady in the hallway. Not for one more minute will I be small for them. The words did not feel dramatic. They felt procedural, like entering a decision into the record. That was the moment I chose myself truly. The cold January air hit my face as I stepped out of the courthouse, but it felt clarifying rather than cruel. I walked slowly toward my car, my boots crunching over thin patches of ice, my breath steady. I had no plan written down, no list, no script. But years on the bench had taught me what to do when someone tried to take something that was not theirs. Establish facts, secure ground, and move before the other side realized they had already lost. I drove straight to Harry Colvin's office. Harry had been my colleague for almost 20 years, sharp-eyed, mild-mannered, always chewing on the end of a pencil. He had retired 5 years before I did, but he still kept a modest practice downtown. When he saw me walk in without an appointment, his eyebrows lifted in concern. "Lillian, are you all right?" "No," I said simply. "But I will be. I need your help." He didn't ask questions immediately. He just gestured toward his office, closed the door behind us, and waited. I sat in the chair across from his desk, opened my handbag, and placed the stack of documents in front of him. He read the first page, then the second. By the third, the color had drained from his face. "Who filed this?" he asked quietly. "Trevor," I said. "At Becky's urging." Harry set the papers down, took off his glasses, and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "You're competent, Lillian. There's no basis for this. It's manufactured." "I know that," I said. "But we're going to prove it formally." And so, for the next several hours we did just that. First, we went to Dr. Myers, my physician of 15 years. Harry explained the situation succinctly. "Dear." Myers immediately performed a full cognitive assessment, more thorough than the standard screening. Memory, reasoning, problem-solving, recall. I answered every question calmly, clearly. Years of reading case files, analyzing evidence, and writing rulings had kept my mind sharper than many people half my age. When we were done, Dr. Myers signed a statement of full capacity. Then came the financial portion. Harry helped me contact the bank and freeze every shared access point Trevor had been added to years ago, for emergencies. The representative on the phone asked politely, "Reason for changes?" I answered calmly, "Security." I did not offer more. I did not need to. Next, we opened a new account, private, protected, with alerts routed only to me and Harry. I transferred the bulk of my savings immediately. I also changed every password. Banking, insurance, utilities, property tax portal. It took nearly an hour, but with each change, something inside me felt steadier. After that, we moved to the legal protections. Harry drafted a formal revocation of all prior powers Trevor had held, financial or otherwise. I reviewed every line, adjusting phrasing the way I used to do on the bench. Then we drafted a new will, one that placed clear boundaries around what Trevor was entitled to. No ambiguity, no loopholes, no access without oversight. Fair but not naive. "Are you sure about this?" Harry asked when we reached the final clause. "Yes," I said. "I'm done assuming the best while they prepare for the worst." When everything was typed, printed, and signed, Harry leaned back in his chair and exhaled. "This will hold. They can't touch anything now." But that wasn't the end. "Harry," I said, "there's something else." He waited. "I want to file a judicial request. Not as a favor. As procedure." His eyes sharpened. "Regarding the petition?" "Regarding the attorneys involved." I paused. "Becky included." He considered that for a moment, then nodded. "It's appropriate. If what I'm seeing is accurate, and it is, there are grounds for review." So we prepared the request, formally and meticulously, with supporting statements from Dr. Myers, copies of protected documents, and clear evidence of intent to mislead the court. It was not revenge. It was accountability. When we finished, Harry placed all the paperwork into a labeled folder and closed the cover. "They won't expect this from you," he said softly. "No," I agreed. "They expect me to be quiet." By the time I left his office, the sun had dipped low, turning the snow pale blue. I unlocked my car, sat behind the wheel, and placed the folder gently on the passenger seat. Becky had spent weeks crowing about the important case she would be arguing the next morning. A high-profile corporate dispute she believed would secure her path to partnership at her firm. She had told Trevor, who had told me, bragging without realizing what he revealed. She had no idea who would be sitting on the bench for that case. I looked at the courthouse clock tower in the distance, its outline softened by the evening light. Quiet power is still power. Procedure is still protection. And I knew something Becky didn't. Tomorrow, she would walk into a courtroom expecting to dominate it. Instead, she would find me, calm, prepared, and holding the authority she had tried to strip from me. I started the engine, feeling the steady vibration beneath my hands. They had treated me like someone to be managed. They were about to learn who I really was. The next morning I woke before my alarm, already fully aware of the day. The memory of Becky shouting in the lobby flickered through my mind, but it no longer made my stomach twist. I turned my head, saw the folder on my nightstand, and felt only a clean, steady focus. I dressed as I had for years on the bench. Navy suit, white blouse, low heels I could stand in for hours. I poured tea into Trevor's crooked clay mug, watched the steam rise, then set it down untouched on the counter. My hands did not shake. At the courthouse, the side entrance clerk greeted me the way he always had. "Morning, Judge," he said, then blinked as if remembering I was retired. I nodded once. Titles come and go. Competence remains. In chambers, I opened the docket. Halfway down was the case Becky had been boasting about for weeks, the one she said would change everything for her career. I read the file silently, tracing the arguments with my finger, and then closed it. When the bailiff knocked, I rose. The clerk's voice rang out as I stepped into the courtroom. "All rise. The court is now in session." I walked to the bench. Only then did Becky look up. The expression on her face when she recognized me is one I will not forget. Surprise first, then disbelief, then a quick, skittering fear she tried to swallow. "The Honorable Judge Lillian Moore presiding," the clerk finished. "Counsel," I said, looking straight at her, "you may proceed." Her usual polished confidence was nowhere to be found. She began her opening statement too fast, stumbled, restarted. Dates tangled. A crucial number came out wrong. She cited a statute that had nothing to do with the issue at hand. Opposing counsel objected. I sustained. Her cheeks flushed a blotchy red. As the morning wore on, the difference between posturing and preparation became obvious. The other attorney's questions were clean and methodical. Becky's were scattered, alternately fawning and aggressive. When a witness contradicted her, she snapped, "That's not what you told us before," loud enough to draw a warning look from me. "Watch your tone, counsel," I said evenly. "Yes, Your Honor," she muttered, eyes dropping. I did not mention her petition. I did not let my personal history with her enter the record. But in that room, her own behavior spoke clearly. The jury watched her tighten misstep, overreach. Her arrogance, stripped of protection, looked very small. After the session in chambers, Harry arrived with a thin stack of papers. Internal reviewers had begun looking at her recent cases after our filing. There were irregularities, signatures that did not match, billing entries that overlapped impossibly, documents quietly edited after clients had signed them. What she had done to me was not an isolated lapse. It was part of a habit. Within weeks, the consequences found her. Her firm, once so proud to showcase her on its website, asked her to resign. When she refused, they terminated her. The bar opened an investigation. Her license was placed on hold. The shine she cared so much about turned dull overnight. Trevor's unraveling happened more quietly. Without Becky's income and with her legal troubles growing, their mortgage payments became heavy. Credit cards filled. The future they had planned around my house slipped out of reach the moment my accounts locked and my will changed. No windfall was coming. They would have to live on what they had earned themselves. One cold evening, I heard a tentative knock on my door. I checked the peephole and saw my son. He looked older than he had a month before. His shoulders rounded forward, his hands were empty, his eyes ringed in tired gray. I opened the door but did not step aside. "Mom," he said, voice raw. "Can I talk to you?" The lamp behind me threw a warm circle over the hallway, over the photo of him at 8 with the clay mug. For once, I let the silence stretch until he filled it. I waited there, silent. He stood on my porch as if it were unfamiliar territory, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. For a moment I remembered the boy who used to leap up these steps 2 at a time, backpack bouncing, shouting about a spelling test or a scraped knee. Now he could barely look at me. "Mom," Trevor said again, his voice catching. "Please. I need to explain." I held the doorframe lightly with one hand. "Go ahead." He swallowed. "Everything's falling apart. Becky lost her job. They're investigating her. The house, we might lose it. I didn't know it would get this bad. I thought we were just planning ahead for you." Planning ahead. I thought of the petition, the invented symptoms, the transfer date circled in someone's calendar. I did not let my face soften. "You signed a document declaring me incapable," I said. "You agreed to move me out of my home without my consent. That's more than planning ahead." He winced. "Becky said it was temporary, just to keep things organized. She said you'd be safer, and the house would be easier to manage, and you didn't read the fine print," I finished quietly. "Or you did, and you ignored it." His shoulders slumped. The porch light caught the faint lines at the corners of his eyes. "I was stupid," he whispered. "I was scared about money, about the future." She made it sound logical. "I told myself you'd understand, that you'd forgive me if it helped everyone. Everyone except me. Do you know what scared me?" I asked. "Not losing money. Not even losing the house. It was standing in that lobby, listening to my own son stay silent while his wife announced to strangers that his mother was worthless." He flinched at the word. "I wasn't worthless," I continued. "I was convenient." Tears filled his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said. "I was blind. I let her talk me into something unforgivable. But I see it now. I've lost her. I'm about to lose everything else. I don't want to lose you too. Please, Mom. Help me. Tell them you're okay with me managing things. Loan me something. I'll make it right." There it was. Beneath the apology, the familiar request. Access, assistance, rescue. For years, my instinct would have been to rush in, to fix, to protect him from consequences. I had done it when he crashed his car, when he missed rent, when he ignored warning letters about debt. I had believed that saving him was a form of love. But love without boundaries is not love. It is erasure. I took a slow breath. The house behind me was warm. The lavender sachet in the hall closet scented the air. The photograph of him at 8, with his crooked clay mug, hung on the wall where I could see it over his shoulder. My heart hurt, but it did not waver. "Trevor," I said, "I will not testify against you. I will not seek to punish you. But I will also not save you from the results of your choices." He stared at me, confused. "What does that mean?" "It means I've already chosen who I will save," I answered. "And it isn't you." Silence settled between us, thick and heavy. Somewhere down the street a car door slammed. A dog barked twice and quieted. Trevor's mouth opened as if to argue, then closed again. "You're my mother," he said finally, anger and desperation tangled in his voice. "You're supposed to be on my side." "I am on the side of the person you tried to discard," I said. "My own." His eyes shone. For a heartbeat I thought he might collapse into the kind of sob that could wash everything away. Instead he stepped back from the door. "I guess I deserve that," he whispered. "I didn't say you deserve to suffer," I replied. "I said I won't be the one to cushion the impact this time." He nodded once, a jerky, uncertain motion, then turned and walked down the steps. He did not look back. I watched him reach the sidewalk, shoulders hunched against the cold. For the first time in his life, I let him walk away without calling after him, without offering help, without promising it would all be all right. When I closed the door, the click of the latch sounded final but not cruel. It sounded like a boundary. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a pad of paper and an old blue pen. I wrote a heading at the top of a fresh page. What I choose for myself. Under it I listed simple, solid things. Sell the house on Maple Street on my own terms, find a smaller place near the lake, keep every account in my name, see my granddaughter in spaces that feel safe and kind. The house had been my pride, then my shield, then my burden. Maybe it could now be my ticket forward. They had treated it as a prize to win. I would treat it as a door to walk through. I set the list beside my teacup and looked at it until the ink dried. Becky's list of retirement homes still sat folded in a drawer. Hers was a plan for where to put me. Mine was a plan for where I would go. For the first time in months, the future felt like mine. I moved into a bright apartment near the lake in early spring. The space was smaller, quieter, but it felt like mine in a way the old house hadn't for years. Morning light pooled across the floorboards. I brewed tea in the clay mug Trevor made as a child and listened to gulls crying over the water. I filled my days with small, steady joys. An art class on Tuesdays, evening walks along the shoreline, volunteer hours at the library where children leaned against my arm as they sounded out words. I saw my granddaughter often now. Trevor brought her quietly, humbly, without Becky. We baked cookies, painted tiny bright messes, whispered secrets that stayed between us. Some wounds healed slowly, but they healed. I learned that survival isn't loud. Sometimes it's a single decision made in a quiet hallway, a boundary drawn with a steady hand, a life reclaimed one step at a time. If this touched something in you, you belong here. Subscribe and we'll keep telling the truths that make us stronger.